There were 3 of us, me, Nick, and Ben. We were just 3 friends on holiday, drinking, partying, and chasing whatever thrill the night had to offer. We had no idea we were driving straight into a nightmare. It started with a wrong turn. We had rented a car and were traveling through a remote part of Greece, a place so isolated that it didn't even show up on Google Maps. The road stretched endlessly ahead, the darkness thickening around us as the night set in. The plan was simple. Drive through the night and hit the next major city. More drinks, more fun, more chaos. But then we realized we had no idea where we were. The road signs were in Greek, unreadable. The gas gauge was dropping. The last bit of cell service had vanished an hour ago. We were lost. That's when we saw it, a lone gas station, glowing dimly under a flickering neon light. We pulled in, rolling to a stop on the cracked pavement. The place looked like it hadn't seen a customer in years. A single old man stood behind the counter inside, watching us. When we asked for directions, he didn't answer immediately. He just stared, his cloudy eyes unreadable. Then, without a word, he reached under the counter and pulled out a brochure. A village. Not a town. Not a city. A small, isolated village, one that wasn't on our map. "You should go," the old man said, his voice rough with age. "Stay the night." Something about the way he said it unsettled me. But what choice did we have? The road was too dark, too unfamiliar, and we were running out of gas. Something different. Nick had grinned, flipping through the faded pages of the brochure. Something different. If only we had known how different. We got back into the car, took the next left turn, and drove into the darkness. The road to the village felt wrong. At first, it was just a narrow, winding path cutting through the dense forest. The further we drove, the more the trees seemed to close in, swallowing the headlights in an abyss of blackness. No streetlights, no signs, just emptiness. Nick was scrolling through his phone. "Still no service," he muttered. Ben tapped the window. "Look at this place. Feels abandoned." But then, finally, faint lights flickered through the trees. The village, or at least what was left of it. The place was tiny, barely more than a handful of buildings clustered together. The streets were empty, the houses dark and weathered. Not a single person in sight. The only place that seemed remotely functional was a small bar, its door creaking open in the wind. But first, we needed a place to sleep. The cabins were isolated, spread out far apart from each other. Not like a hotel, more like something else. Each cabin was self-contained. One queen bed, one single, a bathroom, and a kitchen. Ben, Nick, and I played rock, paper, scissors to decide who got the single bed. Nick won. Ben and I would be sharing. The place was decent enough except for one thing. The window. It took up the entire wall, a massive curtainless square of glass. During the day, it probably offered a nice view of the forest. At night, with the light on inside, it felt like a two-way mirror. Anyone outside standing in the darkness could see everything inside, and we wouldn't see them at all. A bad feeling settled in my chest, but I brushed it off. Just one night, I told myself. Then we'd be gone. I had no idea how wrong I was. We didn't plan on staying inside for long. The village bar was calling our names, and we were ready to drink. Before we left, we agreed on something simple. We'd hide the key under a rock by the porch in case we split up. Whoever got back first would leave the door unlocked for the rest. Simple. "Why don't you say it louder so everyone can hear?" Ben joked. Nick grinned. And then, just to be an asshole, he shouted it at the top of his lungs. "The key is under the rock. Right by the front porch." Ben rolled his eyes. "You're an idiot." I laughed, but something about it felt off. Our cabin was isolated, sure, but still, something about the emptiness around us made it feel like maybe, just maybe, we weren't as alone as we thought. Shrugging it off, we jumped into the car and drove off. The bar was surprisingly fun. We drank ouzo, strong, sweet, and dangerously smooth. One shot turned into 5, then 10, then... "Sorry, guys," the bartender finally said, laughing. "You're out. We're out." We had drunk the place dry. The night had slipped away. The bar was closing. And that's when we noticed Ben was gone. We scanned the room, checked outside, even asked the bartender. Nothing. "Maybe he left early?" Nick suggested, slurring slightly. I frowned. He would have told us. But he was nowhere. We shrugged it off. Maybe he got tired and went back to the cabin. Big mistake. We had no idea Ben never made it back. The road back felt longer than before. Nick was half asleep in the passenger seat, mumbling about needing to piss, while I kept my eyes on the narrow, winding path ahead. Then, finally, the cabin appeared in the headlights. I turned into the gravel driveway, the tires crunching loudly in the silence. Something felt off. The cabin looked the same, and yet I had this sinking feeling in my gut. Nick groaned, shifting in his seat. "Just park, man. I'm about to piss myself." I killed the engine. We got out and stumbled to the front porch, gravel shifting beneath our feet. Nick bent down to check under the rock. The key was gone. We both froze. Nick tried the doorknob. Locked. "What the fuck?" He looked at me, confused. "Ben must be inside." I banged on the door. "Ben, open up. We need to piss." Silence. Nick banged his fist against the wood. "Hurry up, man." Then, inside the cabin, we heard movement. Not footsteps. Something shuffling, like someone crawling across the floor. My stomach twisted. "Damn, he must be wasted," Nick muttered. The door unlocked. Nick rushed off to one side of the cabin to relieve himself, while I went to the other. And that's when I saw it. The handprints. Long, thin handprints smeared across the window, only visible because of the mist outside. I went completely still. They were wrong. Too long. Too thin. And worst of all, they were on the outside, which meant something had been watching us, standing right there. I swallowed hard, my breath turning shaky. Holy shit. A cold, crawling dread spread through my chest. But I forced myself to shake it off. Just a smudged handprint, I told myself. A trick of the light. Right? I hurried inside, and that's when everything went wrong. I slammed the door shut behind me. We were not turning the lights on. That giant window. If there was someone or something outside, I didn't want to see it. I locked the door and hurried toward the bed. Nick was already face down in the single bed, snoring before his head even hit the pillow. Ben was lying in the queen bed, face turned away, completely still. I hesitated. Something about him looked off, but I was too damn tired to care. I crawled into bed, pulled the blanket over me, and tried to sleep. But the second I closed my eyes, I felt it. A burning sensation at the back of my neck. A feeling like I was being watched. My heartbeat sped up. Something was wrong. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. I could feel Ben's eyes on me. I wasn't facing him, but I could sense it. Like he was awake now, staring at me, watching me, menacingly. My body went hot. My breath caught in my throat. Was he angry? Maybe he was pissed that we left him? I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just in my head, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that Ben wasn't just staring at me, that he was holding his breath, waiting. I forced my breathing to slow, tried to calm down. Minutes passed. My eyelids grew heavy, and eventually I drifted off. Knock. 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 My eyes snapped open. Someone was at the door. A voice called out, Open up! You said you wouldn't lock it! Thud, thud, thud. The knocks turned to pounding. Open the door! It's cold out here! A cold, paralyzing terror swept through my entire body, because the voice outside, it was Ben, and Ben was already inside the room. My blood went ice cold. The pounding on the door continued. Open up! You said you wouldn't lock it! My mind screamed at me. Ben was already inside. So who the hell was at the door? A sound came from the bed. Something shifting. The blankets rustled. Open up. Said you wouldn't lock it. My mind screamed at me. Ben was already inside. Who the hell was at the door? Sound came from the bed. Something shifting. My heart slammed against my ribs as I turned my head just a little. And I saw it move. The shape in the bed. The thing that was supposed to be Ben was getting up. Not like a person. Not like someone waking up from sleep. It moved in this slow, unnatural way, like a puppet being lifted by invisible strings. My breath locked in my throat. I felt Nick jerk awake beside me. One look. That's all it took. One look at the thing in Ben's bed and we both bolted. Nick and I hit the door at the same time, ripping it open. And there was Ben. The real Ben, standing outside in the cold, his face pale and confused. And behind us, a horrible, wet shifting noise filled the room. We didn't look back. We ran. Not once did we look back. The air behind us felt wrong, thick, suffocating, filled with a presence we couldn't see but knew was there. Ben was still shouting, confused, demanding answers. But we didn't stop. We hit the car, threw the doors open, and I fumbled with the keys. My hands were shaking too hard. Nick was already inside, slamming his door shut. Ben turned, finally looking at the cabin. Then, he froze. His face went pale, his mouth slightly open, like he was seeing something he couldn't understand. I didn't look. I couldn't look, but I felt it. Nick inside, slamming door shut. Ben cabin, froze, pale face, seeing something I couldn't understand. That cold, consuming wrongness leaking out of the cabin, stretching toward us like invisible fingers. Ben didn't move. He just stared. I got the car started. Ben, I shouted, get in. But he didn't hear me. He didn't move. And then he reached up and shut his own eyes with his hands, like he couldn't bear to see anymore. Nick grabbed my arm. Go! I slammed the gas pedal. The tires screeched, gravel flying, and as we tore down the road, away from that cabin, away from that thing inside, Ben never said a word. He just kept his eyes shut, and he never told us what he saw. Not once. We drove fast, reckless. We didn't speak, didn't look in the mirrors, didn't stop. Only the sound of the tires on gravel, the pounding of my heart in my ears, and Ben's silence filled the car. Nick and I were shaking, but Ben just sat there, eyes shut, hands trembling, pale as death. He never asked us what happened, and he never told us what he saw inside that cabin. Not then, not ever. We left that place behind, left Greece behind, but the memory never left us. Ben changed after that night. He stopped talking as much, stopped laughing. And the worst part, to this day, whenever someone mentions that trip, whenever someone asks about that night, Ben doesn't answer. He just goes quiet, and without a word, he gets up. He shuts the nearest curtain, and he never looks outside.